Working together to make Leon County safer. All in. All in. Woo!
Welcome back, everyone. On this episode of the LCSO podcast, I'm joined by our Inspector General Greg Gibson, a leader whose career spans more than 3 decades across local, state, and specialized law enforcement, from starting in patrol with the Tallahassee Police Department to overseeing statewide intelligence and emergency response during one of the largest environmental disasters in U.S. history, to now helping lead the operational backbone of the Leon County Sheriff's Office. Inspector General Gibson brings a perspective few in this profession can match. Today, we're talking about leadership, adaptability, and what it really takes to manage law enforcement at every level. Welcome, Inspector General.
Well, thank you, ma'am.
So today we're going to talk about leadership, adaptability, and what it really takes to manage law enforcement at every level. Let's just start 3 decades. Take us back to the 90s.
Yes, ma'am.
What made you join law enforcement?
Well, so in 1985, a DUI suspect caused a crash with me in it that put me in TMH for several months. And then I recognized a calling at that point, I felt, to find a way to stop this from happening to other people. So law enforcement provided that opportunity.
How long were you in the hospital for?
So I was in TMH for about 6 weeks. And then after that, multiple, surgeries, reconstructive kind of surgeries in the months to come. So it took a while to recover.
And that individual, what happened? Do you know? Did you follow up
that individual was actually arrested by the Florida Highway Patrol and ultimately went and served prison time.
Oh, my goodness. Wow. Yes. That is, I'm pretty sure for those who are listening automatically, that was probably something they didn't know. So today, does that incident still just impact how you go about your daily life?
Sure. I'm a very cautious driver. I believe so. And I'm very attentive to and aware of the people's activities around me on the road. And then
1985, when did you join law enforcement, or when did you, start that process?
So I started my first full-time job in law enforcement in 1990 with the Tallahassee Police Department.
Okay. How was it being at TPD, and what were you doing?
So I was hired in as a patrol officer. I was 20 years old. I started there. I remember, kind of my first impressions, I had so much to learn. I didn't know my way around Tallahassee. This was my first career type job, and I just wanted to do it well. I wanted to take every opportunity that I could to learn and grow, and I really had, a good experience there. I met with and worked with some really good people, and I made lifelong friends. I worked for some supervisors who were true role models and people who I aspired to be like. And I also worked for some folks who showed me the kind of officer and supervisor that I wanted to avoid becoming. And all in all, I wouldn't trade the experiences and friendships for anything. And the lessons I learned there helped me to grow professionally and personally.
And then, so while you were at TPD, did you also transition into other units, or was it patrol the entire time?
No, ma'am. I went into, I was a school resource officer at the Second Chance School here in Leon County for a little while. And I also worked as a DARE instructor, the old Drug Abuse Resistance Education. Great program. I loved that assignment. But kind of going back to my patrol experiences there, I had the opportunity to work in everything from traffic crashes to homicides. And I gained a healthy respect for the criticality of having a sense of urgency, investigating incidents thoroughly, documenting cases accurately, and reaching closure in a timely fashion. And then when I did shift into the school system, working with kids was the best. Law enforcement is a people job, right? We have to build and maintain relationships with the people in the communities we serve. And successful relationships are built on trust. Without trust, you can't be successful in this field. And the best way to build community trust is to start having positive interactions with people as early as possible. Schools represent the best possible environment we can or we have to build those foundational relationships. You can humanize the role of the law enforcement officer to the kids. You can let them see you be a positive role model.
Yeah.
And bring a valuable message to them. Be approachable and be fair.
Yeah, those are really valid points. And I think just to, reflect on earlier in the year, I would say February, March, and maybe even in January, we had some of our Council on Status of Men and Boys go into the schools, and then they brought in some of our SRDs to speak directly to the children, and then the sheriff also showed up. So that aligns directly with what you are speaking of.
Yes, ma'am.
Outside of the school portion in DARE, what was your next assignment? Where did you move after that?
So I wanted to be an investigator, and so I was preparing myself to be an investigator. And because you don't always get to see everything from inception to completion in your casework as a patrol officer, so I put out applications, including in TPD, and the first opportunity that came along that my preparation met that opportunity was with the Florida Department of Environmental Protection, Office of Inspector General, and I'm glad. I made that change over to state service. The experiences I had there were tremendous.
And that local policing going into the state level of it, what would you say, like, maybe some of the main differences are?
Oh, wow. So the volume of calls for service with local law enforcement, that's where the bread and butter, if you will, the backbone of law enforcement is accomplished. I kind of have always looked at it as we at the local level tend to be generalists, right? We go at it like an emergency room doctor, you know, and we deal with everything that it comes at us. And state law enforcement, in Florida at least, it's broken up into specializations. So you have areas, like in that case, it was all about environmental protection, environmental regulation, those kind of resource-based things. And then ultimately, you get an opportunity to learn some very specific knowledge about a narrower field of focus.
So very detailed in a certain topic.
Yeah.
And then you can kind of spend time on that topic for a longer period of time versus every day on patrol. It's maybe a victim who is in a domestic violence situation, and then the next day you're saving a cat, and then the next day you're putting out a fire.
And that I think that's a good perspective to take on it. Ultimately, what you're doing is, there's a specific niche within the laws that you're focusing most heavily on. You have the ability in state government typically to enforce all the state laws, and deputy sheriffs have the same ability to enforce those laws as well. But one thing that I did learn, in that, several things I learned in working for state government was I learned a lot about how state government functions and about state geography as a whole. I was exposed to enforcement tools like the Florida administrative codes, which I didn't even know existed prior to my time in law enforcement. And really, my job with the DEP Inspector General's office at that point was to understand and impartially apply laws, rules, policies, procedures as they pertain to agency operations and personnel actions. So I developed at that point kind of a really deep appreciation for the value of well-written policies and operational guidance that's clear and concisely stated and understandable for the end user, the employee.
Nice. Do you recall any mentors while you were at DEP?
Oh, sure. I had some great mentors. One there was Pinky Hall. She was the Inspector General there at DEP, and she made a powerful impact on my career, my perspective in law enforcement. The major I worked for there, wonderful man. I also had an opportunity to work with some really good folks that I had the opportunity later on in my career to bring them into another team and work with me as well.
That's awesome. So staying on that topic, like with the state, you also transitioned to FWC?
Yes, ma'am. Okay,
so at the Florida Fish and Wildlife Commission, what was your primary duties there, and what was the position that you're in?
Sure. So basically, while I was working at the Florida Department of Environmental Protection in the Division of Law Enforcement, I'd moved out of the Inspector General's office into the Division of Law Enforcement, and then I was the last acting director there of it in 2011 into 2012 as we negotiated our merger into the Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission.
Okay.
That was at the behest of the Scott administration. And so it was about, creating efficiencies within the operational components of government. And our two agencies were deemed to be similar enough in mission and function that we could be aligned accordingly. So
nice.
My job was to work with staff, and we developed House Bill 1383 that was presented and advanced through the 2012 regular session of the Florida legislature and ultimately passed. That was 2012.
2012, okay.
Yes, ma'am.
So we're going back to 2012 for those of you who are listening. And at this time, this was like the newly created blended partnership, or was it or was DEP overseeing FWC?
No, it was a singular agency, the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission, which was created by the passage of a constitutional amendment in 1999, then absorbed the remainder of law enforcement assets from the Florida Department of Environmental Protection in 2012, and it also absorbed certain components of the Office of Agricultural Law Enforcement forestry.
Okay, wow, that's nice to know that you were in the mix and at the table during that transition. So at FWC, you oversaw everything from intelligence to technology to training. How do you even, I would say, just process having to manage that level of priority for the state?
It's a task you're given, and you just figure out what the component pieces are, who is responsible for certain elements, how the system works, and then begin to work that system. One of the things that I have had the opportunity, this is my 7th full-time job with a law enforcement agency. I've worked in an alphabet soup of agencies here before I've had the privilege to come here to LCSO. And one of the things I've learned, they're universal principles in being responsible and in leading, if you will, other people, and that leadership's a privilege, and that it depends on trust. Goes back to what I was talking about earlier, and that you always need to remember that you're no better or worse than any of the people you're charged with leading.
That's good.
Learn your people, learn the agency's mission, treat people with respect, be consistent, be fair. Like I said, they're universal principles. Like Pinky Hall, who I referred to earlier, said, bloom where you're planted.
That's really good. Had I known you, because I worked at the Florida Channel for 4 years. And so DEP, FWC, major topics, major agencies that we love covering. And so just hearing this perspective and actually having to have this close contact with someone who was so deep embedded into those two agencies is like a wow factor to me. So this is like my short, what could have been a mini documentary if I was still at the Florida Channel. But since I'm not at the Florida Channel, and I know so many who are listening want to learn more just about you and your experience and not dive deep into FWC, which I would love to do on another podcast episode.
I have watched many of your productions, no doubt.
Oh, well, wow. That's amazing. Thank you so much. Let's talk about the Deepwater Horizon oil spill. Explain to those who may not be familiar with it, what happened, and then just what did you learn under, I would say, pressure? Maybe not for you. That's just my term that I'm using. But if I'm incorrect there, just,
No, it was pressure.
Yeah.
I mean, we had an open water well off the Gulf Coast of Louisiana that had blown out a blowout preventer and was spilling copious amounts of oil into the Gulf of Mexico uncontrolled. that lasted for months. And, of course, each state, kind of stood up in accordance with the FEMA kind of approach to things, Stafford Act kind of responses. Everybody stood up their emergency operations, as is customary in dealing with, say, a landfalling hurricane event or something like that. The only difference there was this wasn't a Stafford Act. This wasn't a Florida Statute Chapter 252 kind of response. This was under the Oil Pollution Act of 1990, a little known piece of federal legislation that was promulgated after the Exxon Valdez disaster in Alaska. That was a closed bay system there and not open water. So it was hard to apply some of the things that were not really foreseen in the creation of Open 90, as it was called, and then help the local emergency managers, because Florida is really, really good at responding to natural disasters under a Stafford Act kind of a mobilization where FEMA is the ultimate payer in all of this stuff. The principal difference with FEMA and Stafford Act responses in Open 90 is the principal payer is the responsible party, right? So in that case, British Petroleum, BP, they wanted to minimize how much they paid out, right? That's just logical in their best interest. Whereas, FEMA dollars come in, they go do what you need to do to respond to things. So it was a challenge to help local emergency managers and even the Coast Guard partners understand and manage the expectations of the local emergency managers at the county level. Florida has a very county-centric disaster response approach. All disasters, all emergencies of that nature are a local problem that then rely upon state resources when their capacities are outstripped, and then ultimately the state would ostensibly rely upon federal resources when their capacities are overwhelmed. So that's kind of the difference in the approach. I could write a book about this topic, and so it's interesting stuff, and I'd be happy to talk more about it at another time. Yep,
and I will be here to listen. And when you talk about that level of management and communication, what is something that you learned through that process that maybe even someone in law enforcement maybe not have experienced, or just to the public of this is how you have to operate in a crisis to that extent? So also that people aren't going haywire thinking, oh my gosh, nobody has control. How did you kind of learn how to navigate that?
Communication is critical. It's critical in leadership of people and organizations or public disaster responses. I do believe that you really can't over-communicate in a situation like that. People are hungry for what does this mean to me? How's this going to impact my life? And at the end of the day, though, you have to be responsible in your communication as well. You need to ground truth things, if you will. Make sure that you're not spreading gossip or rumors, that you're speaking facts based upon direct, empirical observation, proper vetting, and all of that, so that you don't cause panic among the public. That serves no one's interest.
Thank you. Now, as Assistant Sheriff at the Leon County Sheriff's Office, let's talk about what you are overseeing at this time.
Sure. So in my present role, I serve as the newly established Inspector General for the Leon County Sheriff's Office.
Correct. My apologies, Inspector General.
Oh, that's no apologies necessary. I have answered to a lot of titles. Just call me Greg. Is what I say. So this is a newly established role within the agency. The fundamental role of the Office of Inspector General, really in concept and in application here, is to promote transparency, accountability, integrity, and efficiency across all LCSO operational areas by providing objective and timely investigative and audit services to assist in accomplishing the agency's mission. Under our umbrella, we have 3 component pieces. We have an Integrity and Audit Bureau that we're just now establishing that'll be responsible for conducting criminal investigations if there are allegations of criminal conduct perpetrated by employees of the sheriff's office. We'll also be doing audits as well, proactive program audits to compare our activities with the standards that we've set in place for ourselves. Are we following the rules that we've established?
Nice.
And we have, we're a multi-accredited agency. We have the international CALIA accreditation in law enforcement. We have the CFA state level accreditation for law enforcement. We have the FCAC accreditation for our detention facility, and we follow the Florida Model Jail standards over there. That's another component piece of our Inspector General's office as well, but I'll get to that in just a second.
Okay, great.
We also have the the Internal and Background Investigations Unit within the Integrity and Audit Bureau. They're responsible for conducting administrative investigations and vetting all applicants for potential hire into the agency.
Prior to hire and during, or just?
Prior to hire, that's what the background's about, right? When people come in to work for the agency, and there's a concern about their conduct, their behavior, whether it's an internal observation or an external complaint, we would then investigate the administrative aspects of that as well to ensure policy compliance, procedural compliance, training compliance.
Right.
We also have the Professional Standards and Research Bureau here within the Office of Inspector General. That includes all of those accreditation components for law enforcement and detention I just told you about, as well as all policy development and the research and planning components of the agency. And then the third piece for us is training. We have all law enforcement and detention training and the law enforcement and detention field training and evaluation program coordination responsibilities.
So it's really overseeing pretty much all of the agency personnel with those different components that you just named, or is any personnel that's left out of that category?
We have responsibility that flows directly from the sheriff himself, and so we have access to every area, every nook and cranny, if you will, of the agency, in order to guarantee that transparency and that full inspection authority or investigative authority within the agency. We have vital touch points with just about every member of the organization. Yes, ma'am.
And prior to you serving as Inspector General, is this a newly created role?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
So the sheriff is leaning into transparency. He wants the public to know how LCSO does its business. He wants us to be absolutely accountable, and he is really leading the way. I mean, from our research that we've put into this, there are some other inspectors general at about 3 other three other sheriff's offices in the state of Florida, but none are structured the way we are structuring this one. And our intent is to, within the next 2 years, make application for initial accreditation to the Commission for Accreditation of Florida Law Enforcement Agencies.
Nice. And so for those of you who are listening and you've listened to quite a few of the conversations, I told you I'm always going to bring you the good news and good stuff that's happening at the Leon County Sheriff's Office. So you've heard it directly from our Inspector General. This is another way that the Leon County Sheriff's Office and Sheriff Walt McNeil is choosing to be intentional and provide that transparency to you all. Just to kind of close this segment before we hit that 30-minute mark, after more than 30 years in the profession, right, how has your definition of leadership changed?
Well, I think that the idea, you see more right over the course of time. You see things that kind of resonate with you and you go, hey, I can thrive under that person's leadership, right? Or I wither under that person's leadership. And I think that's kind of where I've developed a sense of, what I'm nothing special. I'm just a everyday guy showing up to work. And so if I'm going to thrive under somebody's leadership, I want to be like that person, right? I want to be somebody that I'd be happy to go to work for every day. If things might cause me to wither, I dare say they're probably going to cause other people to feel that same kind of, concern. And so avoid those.
That's good. Anything else? Any advice you want to leave to those who may be interested in law enforcement?
Well, yes, I like that question.
Good.
So developing good writing skills.
Okay.
No matter how you slice it, the bulk of this job is about creating detailed, comprehensive reports, and that can't be overstated. I'm telling you. Prepare to meet opportunities when they arise. Give 10% more than the average in terms of effort, and you are going to outperform your competition. Stay humble but hungry, and pick a Florida retirement system participating employer like LCSO, and stay in FRS for maximum portability. That decision alone will pay long-term dividends for you.
I love that. Thank you so much, Inspector General Greg Gibson. So this is the part that I like to surprise people with. At the very end, we do a Q&A rapid speed questionnaire. Aha, see, yeah, gotcha. What's going to happen is I'm just going to ask you a question like this or that, and then you answer with whatever comes to mind first. You ready?
Word association. Okay.
Yeah. All right, here we go. Speed round with Inspector General Greg Gibson. Number 1, patrol or investigations?
Investigations.
Early morning or late night work?
Middle of the day.
Coffee or energy drink?
Coffee.
Planning ahead or adapting on the fly?
Planning ahead.
Training new officers or developing new policy?
Both. Like them both.
That's nice. Leading small teams or large-scale operations?
Either one's fine.
One word to describe leadership?
Service.
Favorite part of your current role?
The people.
What keeps you motivated after 30 years?
Passion for the job.
Nice. Well, that concludes our session for today. Thank you so much for joining us on the LCSO podcast, and we hope to have you again sometime later this year.
Thank you, man.
Working together to make Leon County safer.